COVID-19 has obviously dramatically changed the way we do everything in America these days. What the year 2020 has been, one of the great disruptors of all time. I think everybody would agree. My experience with evolution maybe is nothing quite as dramatic as a pandemic that we've seen this year.
It really has been more extensive and more extreme than any of the others that I've dealt with. Most of the ones that we've dealt with in my career have been driven by advances in technology, and that's been a lot over the course of 43 years, but for the most part, they were kind of gradual and you had an opportunity to get used to them. To me, this one is different in that it hit very quickly. I mean, really within 30 to 60 days, our whole world was pretty much turned upside down in terms of how we practice law. But the other thing that's different about it is, in the past, it was all about adjusting primarily to technology and the changes that were being done in that, whereas here, you also have the healthcare component to it. It's like a lot of the challenges that we've had over the years where you get hit, especially with these technological changes. They're kind of hard to adjust to, but I think we're going to come out of this with some benefits from it. This one is different in that this one's going to come to an end, and we'll have the vestiges, I guess, of this.
Well, first I'd say, Michael, I don't know of anything that compares in my lifetime to what we're living through with COVID. The Spanish flu, 1918, 1919 is probably the closest thing in our memory of an illness like this that has disrupted our society and our livelihood. And I guess before that, you'd have to go back to medieval times to the Black Plague to have anything of comparison. I don't know of any illness or even natural disaster, or even if you think back to 9/11 and the horror of that and the repercussions from that, none of it compares really to the changes that have been wrought by this illness. In connection with law practice, when was the last time you had a jury trial? Well, we know it's been before March was the last time you had one, and when we have one again is anybody's guess. It may be another year before we actually have jury trials. But it brings me to technology, because that's one of the good things that I believe going to come out of this illness. Not only do you have the ability to have children attend school virtually in a safe environment, but you also have your law practice reduced to being on screen. Zoom, if I had been smart and had been prescient back in January or February, I would have bought all the Zoom and Purell stock that I could get my hands on. But that day has passed. But Zoom has been a lifesaver for me in my mediation practice. And I just jumped in with both feet trying to learn all I could about it. And, now I find myself meeting virtually with lawyers and their clients several times a week. And I find that mediations work on Zoom. It's not the ideal. Obviously, it's not as good as meeting face to face and being able to shake hands and look eye to eye with people. But it is a good substitute, and frankly, it's more attractive to me than doing a mediation in person with everybody wearing masks. Things like Zoom are going to be with us from now on. And that's a good thing. I think it's a good way to communicate if there's great distance involved, or if there's some danger maybe of getting people together. There's some mediations I think just ought to be, not because of COVID, but just because of the emotions involved in the case, it well to do it by Zoom.
You know, I can't recall, and I've been in practice here in Georgia since 1979, so I can't recall a disruption of our work life like this in that entire time. Probably the two biggest things that have happened during my practice are 9/11, which was a terrible thing and affected everybody mentally and emotionally in general, but it didn't affect our practice. As far as the other thing, it was the flood of 1994, and where we had no water. Macon had no water for 30 days plus. If you had to say there was a disruption, it would be the burst of technology that has come on since since 1979 to now. It's like coming from the dark ages into the light.
I remember getting the first word processor, and it was a clunky old machine, and that's all it did. It, I guess, was a computer, but it only thing it did was a word processor, and so we later get a computer, and at the office after I left the U.S. Attorney's office, I'm the office manager at Adams Hemingway, and we get our first computer, and the guy says, "You've got a 130 meg hard drive on this computer. You'll never use all of that space. That's a huge hard drive." Well, we don't even talk about megabytes anymore, right? It's gigabytes and now terabytes. But at the time, there just wasn't that much software to gobble up all your hard drive space. And so the evolution has been dramatic in my experience in document production. In legal research, likewise, it used to be you had to use the books and find a case or a code section, and there was nothing on computer. And so if you found a case and you wanted to shepherdize it, you had to pull down a hardbound volume, a paperback red covered volume, and then a little pamphlet. And you had to be sure you were looking in each of those at the exact citation that you wanted to shepherdize. And if you found a case that you needed to go look at, well, you had to take that citation and go to the library and find that book. If there was a case cited in the case you were reading, you'd have to go pull the book down to read that case. Unlike now, where you just do these links. And early on, they were coming out with discs that had old cases on it. And I remember the first one we got went all the way back to 1960, and now, of course, you can go back to 1 Georgia 1, I guess, online. And so computer research was much more difficult to do. If you had a keynote, for example, out of the old West regional reporters, if you had that keynote and you wanted to run it through other states, perhaps, you go find the regional reporter and the digest and run that through. And if you found a case again you wanted to look at more closely, you'd have to go find that book. And as a law student working at the firm, I did the filing, and we had so much filing, and so now it's just all online, and lawyers now have it good as far as legal research is concerned compared to what it used to be. It was a learning curve, obviously, when we started with the computer legal research and email. There was a time you didn't have email, and you would work at your desk and maybe get focused on something and concentrate on it, and you might get a phone call or somebody in the office might drop by. But now these emails come in sometimes in rapid fire fashion, and you're working on something. And I read an article about this yesterday, that the impact of emails on office production is not all good. I mean, sometimes you need a period of time to be focused and concentrated on whatever it is you're working on, whatever the task may be, and it's hard to do that now, harder than it used to be. And so if we handled all the technology sometimes maybe not so good, because it's actually disruptive and can even be counterproductive, I think. Because if I see an email pop up on my computer, well, by golly, I better check it right now, because it might be something very important. More often than not, it could have waited. And so it takes some discipline to try to manage your daily routine to be productive and not be so prone and subject to all these modern day distractions, email being the biggest culprit.
One of the changes that a lot of people don't talk about because we don't use them much anymore were facsimile machines. I don't know how long I'd been out, 6 or 7 years, and I had a call from a client. Somebody wanted me to represent him, and he had just been laid off by a trucking company. And I told him I'd meet him, this was done by letter. And I said, well, when did you get the letter? He said, well, I just got it this morning. I said, well, when did they send it to you? He said, well, this morning. And I said, how was that possible? Well, he brought it, and that was the first time I'd ever seen anything that was sent by facsimile. But it was a big, big help to lawyers, especially if you had a transactional practice, because instead of waiting to have all the original documents in the office before you could close something, you could take fax signatures and know that somewhere there was an original out there, and you could close on the basis of those documents. Another example of something that was very, very hard to learn to start with, but once you got the hang of it, it worked. To me, the most disruptive feature of all of this before we got into the COVID pandemic was when you had to start filing things electronically, which hasn't been that long. I actually did a little bit of work with the Securities and Exchange Commission. They were the first people I knew to do that. Changed everything. You had to get things typeset so that you'd have to take it off site, get it converted to a certain format so they could then send it to the commission. But the great part about that is that once the commission did it and all the courts did it, even though it made things a lot harder, in my opinion, you had a wider database. You could go look at any case in the country and see what had been filed, what the pleadings were. We used to have to sort of make things up on our own in terms of the contents of it, but you don't really have to do that anymore. Somebody somewhere has done something, and now you have access to all those databases. You know, email is actually something I took to pretty quick. I actually learned to email fairly quick, and I have found it to be very helpful because before that, you had to try to get lawyers on the phone. Most of them lawyers don't like to take your call. Very few of them will return it. I found emails to be a very quick, effective way of communicating with lawyers and including other people on the communication, so that if you're trying to, say, schedule a deposition, you can send out emails, and just as long as you don't hit the reply all to some of the embarrassing emails on there, sometimes you're fine. And so that's one thing I actually did embrace very quickly, and I think it's been very helpful to lawyers, with one caveat, and that is there are times where there's no substitute for face-to-face communication.
I'm old enough to not just be old school. I am actually old at 72, but I am old school as well. So technology is really important. I don't know that it has given us more free time. You would think with technology, we can do it quicker, and therefore, end of the day, we knock off at 4 o'clock. No, what it means is you cram more into the day. You become more productive. And so as long as you're using the technology the right way, it does make your life easier in that you produce more work in a day than you used to. I've always been, I guess, one to be more afraid of technology than to be enthusiastic and jump into the use of technology. Every time I click on the screen, I'm hopeful that it will do what I want it to do. But, my regret is that when computers first came out and became so popular, and I knew, of course, that this was going to be the way of the world, I should have gone and taken a keyboarding course and learned everything I could about computers. And right now I'm totally dependent on secretaries and law clerks and young people to keep my computer functioning and me functioning along with it. But I can't do 10% of what a computer is capable of doing just because I've never had any real training on them. I can do a short email and send it, but that's about the extent of it. That and look at my calendar and emails.
When I started in 1979, there were no cell phones, there were only landlines. So, you know, I've come through the evolution of bag phones to cell phones to computers, email, text messaging. I have not gone into Instagram and Twitter. I need to, but I think there's a mental block when you get to be 66, or maybe I can blame it on 56 to 66, but it's that I have too much help, and I never learned how to actually use the technology myself to like do a PowerPoint presentation. Or the practice of law has we're in warp speed now compared to what we were doing, and we were working hard. I mean, because I don't know, we were working many hours, but the production of the pleadings or the letters or the whatever, and then waiting to get information back, and legal research, and now with the stroke of a key, you know, you Google and you got it. And you had to go to the medical school to check out books, if they would even let you, because they wouldn't let lawyers. You had to get a doctor or a med student to sneak in and get medical books out for you. And now you don't need the books anymore. You get it right off the computer. Right now we can work 24/7 and we can work from anywhere. So you can run, but you can't hide now. And I think people are taking less time off, maybe enjoying it less because you can do so much, you feel you should do that much. And and the fact that you can read your emails at home and respond, or you can continue working, and gosh, you can read anything. On our trial work software, I don't have to ever come to the office if I don't want to, unless there's a need. There's really no need for a face-to-face anymore with Zoom. I mean, it's just really incredible how things have changed. I'm not sure that we're ever going back either.
Well, relationships have always been fundamental in any setting, and absolutely in the practice of law. I mean, the ability to get along with lawyers who are not your enemies, they're your opponent maybe, but we lawyers have always taken some pride in going in the courtroom and having a knockdown drag out, if that's what it may be, and walk out of the courtroom and be friends that we were before, and we remain friends. We each have a job to do, and so those relationships have always been important, and I don't think technology changes that one bit.
And don't try to do it on your own. You know, you have, at least in my case, partners, you have staff, you have other lawyers that you can lean on. I've had to do it, especially with technology, with some of the younger lawyers in the firm. They're almost my legal assistants at times because I get frustrated. I don't know how to do that. They've been very helpful to me and either doing it for me or when they can, trying to teach me how to do it.
Technology is a wonderful thing and needs to be embraced, but it's hard for a dinosaur like me to do that. So when I started doing these Zoom mediations, I had to have all of the techno wizards in our office sitting around that conference room helping me get started every day. And I think I finally got it now. I finally reduced it to a rote list of step by step by step to get it up and running, but I think I've got it now. Yeah. I just think it's important to have good relationships with other people and in our profession, other lawyers. And again, the Macon Bar has always had this great reputation for civility and for professionalism. You know, I've seen so many examples of professionalism, and you don't see it everywhere. Um, Small firm lawyers who don't have mentors, you know, all they have to do is ask, and you know, judges will find a mentor, or you know, other lawyers be glad to serve in that capacity. It's always been that way. Um, you, if I've got issues about technology and I can't get them answered here, there are some friends in the profession who will help me and have helped me on occasion with questions about the technology. But
Honestly, relationships with other attorneys are critical at all times. And I was thinking about it in preparation to talk to you about how that's changed. And I don't know if anyone else you've talked to has mentioned the Green Jacket restaurant and the bar of the Green Jacket that was down at across the street from, it was right behind the Georgia Power building on the corner across the street from, I don't know whether it's called the Macon Federal or the Liberty Federal or the whatever building, but right there was the Green Jacket restaurant and bar. And you know, it was just a very congenial way to spend time with other attorneys, that was non-adversarial. And it was a great thing as far as developing relationships and coming together and making it fun and having an opportunity to know people. So that, you know, I didn't go to law school in Georgia, so I thought when I came to interview that it was going to be a very good thing that I had gone to UNC, but as it turned out, it was a negative because I didn't have all these connections with people who had gone to Mercer and to Georgia and Emory and Georgia State. And so I knew I didn't know anybody to speak of. Developing relationships with other lawyers, I mean, it's good for business and marketing and that type of thing, but it's also crucial to be able to bounce things off other people as to what are they doing about this or that in the practice of law, or where should you go to find this, that, or the other, or what has their experience been with this judge or this mediator or that mediator. I don't know how you get by if you don't have connections with other lawyers. Really key. And when you make a mistake on something and the other person is someone that you have a congenial relationship with, they may not be able to forgive it, but they can sure help you with it and not take advantage of you too badly. But I have really learned over the years in general that your most important relationships other than your family are fellow attorneys. I told Tracy Delacona yesterday, she practices on the same floor. She was here sitting where you were, and I said, Tracy, I don't know what I'd do without you. You know, I have her during the pandemic, and she comes over and sits and talks, and I do the same. And so there's so little of that now because of the pandemic. It's almost like such a relief to get to actually talk to somebody. It's very important. I think that the Boodle Inn is a great place to meet people and to, you know, we really should be about mentorship in the practice because we don't have residencies, you know. So I don't know what the answer is, but I think getting to know each other and having people to turn to.
Well, be patient, you know, this too shall pass. I mean, we've seen crises over the ages, I mean, and in our own lifetimes, and things that are very disruptive. And fundamentally, though, you just stay the course, right, and learn from the experiences. I mean, and hopefully, some of them, hopefully never happen again, but you can learn to be resilient and kind of hang in there and learn from it. Maybe be a better lawyer for it, right? I mean, because disruption will occur. I mean, we know it's going to happen. We didn't expect a pandemic in 2020, anything on the magnitude of what we've seen this year, but disruptions will occur. You know, that's the thing about change. The only thing that's certain about change is that it's gonna happen. So just be ready and hang on and enjoy the ride.
I had a lawyer one time that I got into a little bit of a discovery dispute with, and he sent an email, and that was his rule 6.4 communication, and I took exception to it and said I didn't consider that to be a conference. And he wrote back and said, in these times, there's not a judge in the world who doesn't consider an email to be equivalent. And I said, well, it's not, because it's easy to send snippy emails. It's a lot harder to talk to somebody like that when you talk to them live, either in person or on a telephone conversation. So it's the one rule I have in my office. By all means, communicate with me by email, but if there's a serious issue to take up with me, come see me and let's talk about it, because I find way too many lawyers who hide behind almost the anonymity of an email to send sort of snippy things when a conversation goes so much further to kind of break the tensions that can sometimes build up. So, and one thing that I hope we do when we come out of this COVID is that we don't let the Zoom meetings and that sort of thing be an excuse for us not to talk to each other, because it's really hard to carry on professional relations with other lawyers if you don't periodically talk to them. The other concern I have, and it's not going to affect me, but some of the younger lawyers, I would caution them not to let this be an excuse to lose your contact with your client. Because whether you're doing it in a Zoom meeting or by telephone or in person, it's really going to be important that you maintain your personal level of communications with your client. I would just say this, that if you practice for 40 or 50 years, things are going to change in a lot of different areas, and you really have to be nimble. The way you make your money now won't be the way you make your money in 20 years. The people that you have as clients today probably won't be your clients in 20 years. And the way you practice law today almost certainly won't be the way you practice in 20 years. Just recognize that, don't run from it, embrace it, and things will work out fine, because they move forward for a reason. And it's understandable that you kind of bemoan the loss of the way things used to be, but if you're going to make a living practicing law, you're going to have to adapt and change with the times, or you won't survive for 43 years like I have. So.
Email, to me, has always been a great convenience, but something to be handled carefully. We talk about civility, lawyers getting along with one another, and that's always been a big part of the Macon bar. Is lawyers have always mentored other lawyers and have gotten along. You fight through the courthouse and then you go to lunch together, as you have heard people say. And civility has always been a big part of our relationship at the bar in Macon. The thing I don't like about email is there's no inflection. You're not looking at somebody and seeing their facial expressions, or you're not hearing the tone of their voice like over the telephone. And you can misinterpret. We try to keep them short, so we don't always put in words that we would if we were talking, maybe. And it's easy to get the wrong idea from an email. And if it is, or appears to be, too curt, well, the natural reaction is to pull up the keyboard and then hit that send button without thinking anymore about it. And then they've received an email that is harsh and was not really responsive, and not with the first email, not intended to be harsh. And before you know it, you're saying things on an email you wouldn't say face to face, or even on the telephone, with one another. People you're going to run into at the courthouse, on the sidewalk, at church, dinner, wherever, and before you know it, you've driven a wedge that you didn't need to. And my rule, and back before there was email, if I got a letter in the mail that, or a memo or something that I thought needed to have a harsh response to it, and my inclination was to do that, then I would, of course I didn't have a typewriter, I'd dictate to my secretary this letter, and she'd type it up, bring it to me, and I would put it on the corner of my desk for 48 hours. What I referred to as my 48-hour rule. Then I would pick it up again and read it, and 9 times out of 10, I would soften it. I would take out words, I'd rephrase things, and make an effort to respond to the other letter as I would want someone to respond to mine. It's amazing when you've got the ability to immediately respond, the tendency is to immediately respond. You don't want anybody to think you're just sitting over there not paying attention to what's going on. You want to show them you're right on top of it. And if you have a compulsive nature like I tend to, you got to have a 48-hour rule to keep you from doing something you shouldn't do. But I do think the technology is there, and to the extent it's helpful to be prompt with your responses to emails. I think that's a good thing to do. The thing that I would encourage, though, you asked me about what it was like when I was a judge. The thing that judges dislike, I think, certainly true for me and every judge I've ever talked to about it, is if you have that unpleasant exchange, email exchange between lawyers, don't copy the judge. Don't bring the judge in on all of the harsh words that are being said back and forth. It's as if each side wants to convince the judge the other person is bad and should not be believed or is not treating you fairly. And it's petty, that is. And I don't think judges appreciate it. I certainly did not. Now, if you've got your differences, that's fine, but you either call and schedule a telephone conference or a Zoom conference, or you file a motion and a brief and let the other side respond and then have a hearing. There are ways to present your point to the judge, but by copying them on an email, to just be able to show the string of emails that have come before, just not good practice. The biggest impact COVID has had on our profession, I think, is the, temporary, I'm sure, termination of jury trials. I mean, our profession, you can do all the preparation in the world, but if you can't get a jury trial, you're just at a roadblock. And the cases just keep backing up. And the criminal cases are out there in front of the civil cases because typically they take priority. And so, you keep plugging along, taking depositions by Zoom and having hearings by Zoom and that sort of thing, but you really end up at a point where you got to have a jury trial, or you got to have an alternative to a jury trial. And in talking with lawyers and judges, I've had some suggestions that I thought were worth considering. For example, it may be another year before we actually have juries in panels sitting shoulder to shoulder, or we may have to do it in some other way. that we can't right this minute envision. But if the lawyers talk with each other and talk with the judge and use their brains to find something not as good as a jury trial, but something that will bring a resolution and a final resolution, and one that has credibility for the lawyers and their clients, such as a binding arbitration with a high-low agreement in place. So that way, going in, you know you're not going to get hurt badly on either side. You can either have the judge be the trier of the case, the arbitrator, or you can hire your own arbitrator. Or you can have, if the case is big enough and warrants the expense, I mean, you might hire three. I had a nursing home case not long ago. It ultimately got settled before the arbitration, but they had a panel of three arbitrators to hear this death case. And it had it well organized, and they were prepared to go forward and have a binding arbitration, but they ended up getting it settled short of the arbitration even. But that's one thing lawyers could do to move their cases along. But ultimately, the only way we'll get rid of the growing calendar is through jury trials. And I would just say learn the technology and use the technology. I mean, that's been my problem. I haven't used it until now in to any extent. But the Zoom has been the answer to my handling mediations. I mean, I can do them now with people. I had one the other day, an adjuster on Long Island, and people in Florida, and people in Chicago. And nonetheless, we got it settled without me leaving a conference room. But I had everybody on the screen and go into their breakout rooms. As long as I don't misplace them, which has happened on occasion, sometimes I have to call Rick to come in and help me find where this person is and get them back in the right breakout room. But it's been a challenge, but I've enjoyed it. But I want to get back like everybody else to where we were in February and March, let's say.
You know, I think that understanding and knowing something that my mother used to say was, this too shall pass. This is going to get over. It may seem like it's going to be forever, but I mean, just like some people have chosen not to do their freshman year in college this year, not to go to law school and have a virtual experience. You know, this is going to get over. We all know that. It's like being pregnant. I was a terrible pregnant woman. I would think I needed to drive my car off a cliff, and I'd say, wait a minute, this will end. 'Cause I felt bad every day of every pregnancy. But at any rate, this is going to end. So my way of dealing with it has been to try to find a way during this time to be productive, maybe learn to do something different, or to meet people by Zoom, or what I did was one thing was I started a women's diversity group because I was concerned about, this is about 6 months ago. We have 18 of us, 9 that are African American and 9 Caucasian women in similar age group to mine, but just to meet each other and find out why it is we're so segregated, even though we don't think we're racist. And that's been very interesting and fun. But to use this time and try to view it in a positive, because we'll never have another time like this, God, I hope we don't, where somebody says, go home, you can't work. And I'm like, I've been asking for this for 40 years, something that would tell me not to work. And to have that and then lose the time and not be productive and enjoy that time, it's been a hard time to enjoy because of the heartbreak of the pandemic and the loss of life. But my advice is to keep the faith, try to take advantage of the time, and read the books you wanted to read, or something to where you can feel that you're moving forward. Don't lose touch with the people you're friends with. Work with that. Work out. Letting your health go is the worst thing that I've seen lawyers do. And we used to have a terrible problem with being so many of attorneys drinking too much, or I think that's, maybe, I don't know, but I think that's less. Maybe because we don't have the green jacket, I don't know. People used to have bars in their office. They used to have spittoons too. When I first started, that was incredible. That's gone. But, as far as advice, it's focus on yourself and your health and your family, and be kind and understanding to other people, because you don't know what they're going through, and to try to be that person that other people turn to for help. And I think the way you do that is by keeping your connections and being open to people who call and want to talk to you or have a problem. But we aren't walking in each other's shoes, and we don't know what's happening in each other's lives, or what losses people. I mean, there are a lot of losses these days, and try to find ways to help. We were involved in the 30-day fund. A lot of lawyers stepped up with that to help small businesses. Our firm is working with the food bank now, and we're trying to, whether it's that we volunteer 18 to 20 people to help with the food drive, that's a good thing, or give money to buy the food, because there are a lot of hungry people. And I think as lawyers, getting out there and helping other people during a time of disruption makes us feel good about ourselves, but it also helps the profession in general. We don't have that great a reputation, so I think finding ways to help the profession, finding ways to use your time to help other people, and which gives you connections to other people, which generally leads to business for the lawyers. So there are lots of things you can do rather than get depressed and stay home, which is sure, there's a temptation to do that too. But I would say make the opportunities to get out there and do things, and wear your mask and be a good role model. But we as lawyers, I think, have a duty to be present and out there and be role models and be available. Waldo, my husband, says to be a good doctor, and in their practice, you have to be affable, able, and available. And I said, well, that really applies to all of us. You need to be affable, kind and understanding and open, available, meaning you make yourself available, and able, which, to be trained in our profession to help people, it's a wonderful thing. It's just a wonderful thing. So I would say affable, able, and available. Make that your mantra, and just keep the faith that this is going to pass and we're going to be just fine.